Hello everyone, welcome back to the Strange Night podcast channel. Episode 1, The Phantom Hauler and the Last Stop. The Arizona desert wind at midnight didn't carry coolness. It was just a stream of scorching, dry, and dusty air, like the breath of a giant creature in a deep sleep. Tung, a young truck driver, found himself trapped on this stretch of road. His electronic map was dead, and the phone signal was non-existent. He had done the one thing every veteran trucker warns against: turning onto Highway 666. They called it the Lost Road, where all signs lie and time refuses to obey the laws of physics. After hours of wrestling with the darkness and the unnerving feeling of being watched from the distant sand dunes, Tung spotted a glimmer of hope. By the side of the road, an old truck stop emerged under the crescent moon. The sign was old and rusty. Only the words, "Old Betsy," were legible. The place had been abandoned for years. The diner windows were shattered, and the parking canopy sagged like a skeleton. But to Tung, its deadly silence was still better than the menacing solitude of the highway. He turned off the engine, and the silence immediately swallowed the cabin whole. Tung tried to doze off, but the cold feeling, despite the scorching desert heat, kept him restless. He told himself it was just fatigue and the power of suggestion from ghost stories. Suddenly, a deep, unnatural rumble of an engine ripped through the night. It wasn't the sound of a modern engine, but the heavy, grinding roar of an ancient diesel machine, as if it were compressing tons of metal in an unrelenting hatred. Tung looked through the window. A massive, old tractor-trailer was slowly rolling into the lot. The entire body was shrouded in darkness, but its headlights were strangely dazzling. The light was not the usual warm yellow or cool white. It was a sickly, burning yellow, and instead of illuminating, it seemed to be drawing the light out of everything around it. Tung swallowed hard. He had never seen a truck so rusty and battered, and the most terrifying thing, the cabin was empty. The phantom truck, which Tung later remembered by the legendary name the Phantom Hauler, whispered among his peers, stopped right next to the dilapidated gas pump, its engine still growling like a hungry beast. Silence returned, but now it was disrupted by a new sound, a soft scraping, as if bare feet were dragging across the gravel. Tung held his breath, staring through the narrow window gap. From the surrounding darkness of the lot, hazy shapes began to appear. They were not human, but flickering spirits, the ghostly shadows of the unfortunate souls who had perished on Highway 666. A man in a scorched postman's uniform, a young girl with soaked hair, a group of travelers in tattered clothes. They all shared one thing: vacant, hollow eyes, and they were moving slowly, mechanically, towards the truck's cabin. Tung felt the blood run cold in his veins. He understood. This truck was a soul-collecting machine. It had come to this last stop to recruit more passengers for its eternal journey. The shadows began to gather around the phantom hauler, and Tung heard whispers. Initially meaningless, the sounds then combined into a clear, chilling call echoing in his mind. "Get in. There's room. We go together." One shadow, seemingly an old trucker with a gaunt face, suddenly turned its head. Its pitch-black eyes pierced the windshield, looking directly at Tung. It wasn't searching, it was pointing. At that exact moment, the phantom hauler's engine let out a savage roar, and its burning yellow headlights abruptly focused on Tung's cabin. That light carried an invisible weight, making Tung feel as if an immense force was pulling him out of his seat. He realized he had been spotted. The thin, translucent hands of the spirits began to press against his truck's glass, leaving cold, damp streaks. Tung screamed, scrambling for his keys. He had to leave immediately. He turned the key. His truck's engine whined, then died. He tried again. Another whine. The shadows outside were getting closer, multiplying. Tung could smell the acrid odor of old diesel, the scent of dried blood, and a sickly, sweet stench from the waiting souls. He tried a third time, just as the hand of the ghostly trucker pierced his window. Though only a sensation of bone-chilling cold, it was enough to make Tung convulse. "No more time," the voice echoed in his head. Finally, Tung's engine roared to life. He floored the gas pedal, ignoring reverse or drive. The truck lunged out of the parking lot, crushing stones and debris. He sped wildly down Highway 666, looking in the rearview mirror. The phantom hauler remained stationary at the last stop. But then, its burning yellow lights flickered out, and the entire phantom truck, along with its lifeless passengers, vanished as if they had never existed. All that remained was Tung, breathing heavily, and a long road ahead. In the cabin, a sharp scent of old diesel still lingered, and on the windshield, exactly where the phantom hand had touched, was a patch of dust that had been wiped clean, as if a finger had written a number there. 666. Tung knew. He had met the road, and the road knew his name. His terrifying journey on Highway 666 had just begun. Episode 2, The Bloody Girl and the Rusty Bridge. Highway 666 twisted like a massive snake, leading travelers away from the scorching desert and into the cold, damp borderlands of Oklahoma. Here stood an old steel bridge over a dry riverbed, which locals called the Bride's Crossing. This was where Sarah's tragedy began. That night, drizzle and thick fog enveloped the bridge. We and Lynn, a couple on their way to a vacation resort, had strayed onto this road. The headlights of their old car barely illuminated a few meters ahead, turning the bridge's rusty steel beams into a sequence of hideous, spectral forms. The air in the car was heavy, not due to humidity, but because of a strong sense of foreboding. Just as the clock struck midnight and their car tentatively drove onto the bridge, Lynn gasped. By the side of the road, right under the headlights, stood a young woman. She wore a pristine white wedding dress stained with mud and a dark red liquid. She stood alone, huddled in the rain, her brown hair matted to her face, her beautiful but pale face utterly expressionless. "Oh God, she must have been in an accident," Lynn cried out with worry. We hesitated. The ghost stories about Highway 666 he had heard over the satellite phone suddenly came back to him, but his conscience wouldn't allow him to abandon someone in need. He stopped the car. When we stepped out, the cold was bone-chilling. Strangely, the girl didn't seem to be shivering. As she slowly approached the car, Tung noticed her wedding dress wasn't just muddy, but drenched in blood. Not dried blood, but fresh, sticky blood. "Are you okay? What happened?" we asked. The girl didn't answer. She just stared into the empty space inside the car where Lynn was sitting. Her voice was faint, like the wind whistling through a crack in an old window. Please take me away. Take me across the bridge." Lynn, despite her fear, opened the back door for the girl.
As soon as the girl sat down, an icy, sharp cold like a blade flooded the car cabin, pushing back the warmth generated by the heater. The car started to fill with a thin mist, but the strange thing was, the girl's breath did not condense into fog in that cold air. Hui quickly drove off. He tried to speak to the girl through the rearview mirror, but she remained silent, only looking out the window as if searching for something lost. "What is your name?"
Lynn whispered. The girl turned back, and in the dim light of the car interior, Lynn saw her face more clearly. It was terribly beautiful, without a drop of blood. Her lips so pale they almost blended into her skin tone. Her face was perfectly smooth, without a wrinkle or a facial muscle movement, like a flawless plaster statue.
"Sarah," the girl murmured. "I got lost."
Just then, the car shuddered violently as it drove off the bridge surface. Hui breathed a sigh of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted.
"We're off the bridge, Sarah. You're safe now," Lynn said, turning back to look.
But the back seat was empty. Sarah had vanished. Lynn screamed, utterly terrified. Hui slammed on the brakes. They both looked back simultaneously. No door had opened. No sound was made. The girl had simply disappeared into the cold air. Hui tried to reassure his wife, saying it was just an illusion caused by the fog and fatigue. But when Lynn looked down at her hand, she saw a small silver object glittering on her right ring finger. It was an antique silver wedding ring, not hers, and it wasn't loose. It fit perfectly.
"What is this?"
Lynn trembled. Hui grabbed his wife's hand. The silver ring was unusually cold, and when he tried to take it off, Lynn shrieked in pain. The ring seemed to have tightened, digging into her flesh.
It won't come off,"
Lynn sobbed. Suddenly, an unbearable sharp pain spread across Lynn's arm, and then up to her head. She slumped down. In her mind, she saw a horrifying image. A white convertible crashing into the bridge railing, the terrifying screech of metal, and Sarah's face, horrified and bloody, looking at her. She wasn't just seeing the accident. She was reliving Sarah's moment of death. Lynn lifted her head, gasping for breath. She looked at Hui, and in one terrifying moment, she saw him wearing a top hat and a white suit, his face as pale as Sarah's.
Who are you?"
Lynn stammered. The wedding ring on Lynn's finger continued to tighten. Every beat of her heart was a beat the ring burrowed deeper into her skin, creating a horrifying link between Lynn and Sarah's fate. Lynn had unintentionally become the substitute bride of the cursed bridge. She either had to complete Sarah's unfinished journey or seek out her dead groom, who was still wandering somewhere on Highway 666, demanding his bride back. And when Hui looked at his wife, he saw something equally terrifying. Sarah's tattered, blood-soaked lace wedding dress seemed to be slowly manifesting over Lynn's white t-shirt. They had escaped the bridge, but not its curse. The silver ring was a deadly vow, and Highway 666 had claimed its bride. Episode 3, The Flesh Eaters Harvest Festival. Highway 666 continued to lure the foolish deeper into the heart of America, to the vast, chilling cornfields of Kansas. After the terrifying experiences in Arizona and Oklahoma, Hui and Lynn had tried to escape the cursed road, but it seemed that every turn they made only took them deeper into its maze. The silver ring was still on Lynn's hand, cold and faintly bleeding, physical proof that they could not escape. They found a red dirt road that promised an exit. As night fell, they drove past an old wooden sign, crudely painted. the Great Harvest Festival. Don't miss out. Desperate for a place with people, they decided to follow the directions. Soon after, they arrived at an old farmstead where the bonfire lights danced erratically and strange folk music echoed in the air. Dozens of locals had gathered. They wore outdated, ragged farm clothes, and the most horrifying detail was their masks. They were made from dry, shriveled organic materials, seemingly animal hides or dried corn husks, with crude holes for eyes and mouths. Although they felt something was terribly wrong, exhaustion and loneliness overpowered their fear. Hui and Lin tried to blend in. They were offered a type of warm cider that was sickeningly sweet and slightly metallic. The locals, their eyes peering out from behind the masks, spoke in ancient words and chuckled awkwardly. They kept staring at Lin, particularly the silver ring on her hand, with a look of awe and craving. As the festival reached its peak, the locals began to chant songs praising the god of abundance and the loop of fertility. Their collective shouting sounded like the muffled cries of hundreds of oppressed people. Then the leader, a tall man with a corn husk mask shaped like a gaping mouth, strode towards the cornfield. "It is time for the harvest," he roared, his voice hoarse and full of fervor. Hui and Lin looked out at the cornfield. They expected to see large bundles of corn brought in, but instead, they saw the villagers carrying old, sharpened farming tools, sickles, mattocks, and large hooks.
"What are they harvesting?"
Lin whispered, her stomach tightening with dread. As they tried to sneak out of the perimeter of masked figures, Hui saw the leader. Beneath the mask, his face wasn't human skin, but a rough, cracked epidermis, almost resembling a corn husk. When they reached their car, the cheering behind them had turned into maniacal laughter. They had been spotted. The bride must not leave," a shrill voice rang out from the crowd. He didn't call Lin by her name, but by the haunting title from episode 2, The Bride. Hui and Lin scrambled into the car, turning the key, but the car wouldn't start. A man wearing a pumpkin-shaped mask stood right in front of the car, holding a gleaming sickle. Lin, in a moment of desperation, raised her hand. The silver ring on her finger suddenly felt red-hot, like a piece of coal. She remembered the painful sensation of Sarah manifesting in her mind.
"We do not belong to you,"
Lin screamed, her voice echoing strangely, as if two voices spoke at once, hers and Sarah's. The masked figure in front of the car paused. He showed no fear of Hui, but seemed momentarily terrified of Lin and the ring. Seizing the moment, Hui tried the key again, and this time the engine roared to life. He backed up violently, knocking over a pile of hay, and sped onto the dirt road, leaving behind the bonfire's light and the frantic screams of the flesh-eater worshippers. As they drove away from the cornfield, Lin looked in the rearview mirror. She saw hundreds of masked figures standing motionless at the field's edge, watching them. And the most terrifying sight was the captured travelers being dragged into the corn forest, where the sickles began to swing. Lin knew they had narrowly escaped death, but she also realized that wearing the ring had made her something special to Highway 666. Something that not only spirits, but also terrifying living beings craved or feared. They drove on, but now, alongside the terror, Lin felt a strange emptiness, as if a part of her soul had been left behind in that cornfield. And they knew that no matter where Highway 666 led them, it would always find a way to harvest what it felt was its own. Episode 4,
The deadly photograph from the antique shop. After escaping the bloody cornfield, Hui and Lin continued west, where Highway 666 cut through a dusty, dilapidated ghost town in New Mexico. It was once a thriving silver mining settlement, now only crumbling wooden shacks under the harsh sun. They stopped here because Lin needed to dress the raw wound caused by the silver ring. They found a small, shabby antique shop called Memory Lane, where everything was covered in a thick layer of dust and smelled musty and foul. We, while Lin searched for gauze, accidentally saw an old yellowed photograph in a faded wooden frame. The photo showed a family of about 6. It offered a sense of stillness, a stark contrast to the chaos they were experiencing. We bought the photo for a pittance. As they returned to the car and drove on, we placed the photograph on the dashboard. As the sunset stained the desert sky red, Lin frowned, looking at the photo. "Hey, Hui, I find this strange. Weren't there 7 people in the photo? I remember a little girl holding a doll sitting on the steps, right?" We looked closely again. Indeed, there were only 6 people. The father, mother, and 4 children were standing. There was no little girl sitting on the steps. "You must be mistaken, Lin. Maybe you saw a chair or something," Hui reassured. Now, there were only 5 people in the photo. The mother had vanished. Where she stood was now just a vague, blurry void. And in the second-floor window of the house in the photo, a hazy, indistinct shadow had appeared. Hui grabbed his phone and took a picture of it. He shook Lin awake. "Lin, look! Her mother is gone!" Lin stared horrified at the physical photo, then compared it to the one he had just taken. The youngest daughter in the picture, who had been smiling before, now had unnaturally wide, pitch-black eyes. The photograph was not a keepsake. It was a magical portal slowly killing the people it depicted, absorbing their souls into eternal darkness. The next morning, as they prepared to leave, Hui looked at the photo again. There were only 4 people. The eldest son was gone. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the disappearance. Lin saw it. The father's face in the photo, which was previously somewhat blurred. There were still 3 people. The father, Hui's face, the elder daughter, and the youngest girl with the pitch-black eyes. Around 2 a.m., Hui heard Lin gasp in her sleep. He shook her awake, but she wouldn't stir. Lin was dreaming, and in that dream she kept repeating, "Daughter, don't go in there. Don't look at the window." The photo on the table changed again. The glass shattered, and a piercing shriek, not of human, not of demon, but the wail of utter emptiness echoed in the room. Immediately, the image in the photograph faded, and the pieces of photo paper ripped apart, revealing a horrifying secret hidden underneath. It was a message written in dried. Episode 5, The Sinkhole Trap and the Strange Lights. Highway 666 led Hui and Lin into a harsh and isolated terrain in Nevada, notorious for unexplained disappearances and tales of unidentified phenomena. After escaping the curse of the deadly photograph, they made no sound, just a terrifying silence accompanying each appearance. They decided to leave the car and walk along a narrow trail. After about half an hour of walking, they reached an open field surrounded by withered bushes. In the middle, the camera screen was completely black, but when it reached a certain depth, the screen began to flicker intensely, and a shaky image appeared. Something massive, jet black, seemingly stirring below. It resembled no creature. It was merely a black, slimy mass of flesh, with countless tentacles and a gigantic mouth wide open, waiting. And then, the ultimate terror struck. The silver ring on Lynn's hand began to glow. The pulling down sensation became so strong that Lynn lost her balance, nearly falling into the pit. It wants me down there," Lynn screamed. "It wants the bride." We pulled Lynn back with all his strength. The silver ring, the very thing that had saved them from spirits and cannibals, was precisely what drew the attention of this giant entity. This entity was perhaps an ancient, forgotten god, sustained by the energy of despair and the cursed souls of those who travel Highway 666. As we pulled Lynn away from the sinkhole's edge, the green sphere of light abruptly shot a beam of energy at the camera we had lowered. The camera burst into flames, and the string snapped. Hui and Lynn ran for their lives back to the car, the whispers from the sinkhole seeming to cling to them. This time, it wasn't just rough sounds anymore. In the last moment before they turned to flee, Lynn heard a single word, clear and resonant in her mind, in perfect English, but with an unbearable tonality. "Ours." They drove away, not daring to look back. We knew they had entered the territory of cursed deities. Highway 666 was not just a haven for ghosts and murderers. It was a playground for alien entities or ancient, famished gods. And they, along with the cursed silver ring, had become the prime targets in this hunt. The road ahead led them deeper into Utah. They knew that the strange lights and the whispers from the ground would continue to follow them, waiting for a moment of vulnerability to claim ownership. Episode 6, The Phantom Village Symphony. Highway 666 led Hui and Lynn into the remote, isolated mountains of Utah, where cold wind whistled through the Red Rock canyons. After the sinkhole incident, they realized the silver ring on Lynn's hand was not just a curse, but an antenna attracting every horror imaginable. They found a secluded dirt road leading into a valley marked by a rotten wooden sign. Whisper Creek, abandoned. This was an old Native American settlement where the entire village was rumored to have vanished without a trace in the early 1900s. Hui and Lynn stopped the car. Lynn sensed that the silence here was not an emptiness, but a compressed quiet, holding a massive amount of sonic energy. In the middle of the ruined village, where only wooden frames and piles of stone walls remained, a white man in hiking gear was camping alone. This was Alex, a young composer who had come here for inspiration, believing the historical stillness of the place would help him complete his masterpiece. Hui and Lynn approached Alex, warning him about the road and the ring. Alex chuckled, calling them paranoid from exhaustion. "You should listen to the music. Music is the only truth here." Alex shared that since arriving 3 days ago, every night around 1 a.m., he heard a complex, beautiful symphony emanating from the old village site. It was a combination of many unidentifiable instruments, harmonizing perfectly. He called it the Phantom Village Symphony. As night fell, Hui, Lynn, and Alex sat in the village. Exactly at 1:07 a.m., the music began. It wasn't the sound of conventional instruments. It was the whistling of the wind through cracks in the stones, the scraping of hollow, rotten wood planks, the reverberation of trickling water in the dry creek bed. All these natural sounds of decay combined, forming a truly hauntingly beautiful symphony. Lynn felt the music trying to pull her soul out of her body. The silver ring on her hand vibrated like a tuning fork. It seemed to be trying to sing along with the symphony. Alex was completely mesmerized. He jotted down the music in his notebook, his face ecstatic with delight. "Magnificent! This is a masterpiece. This is the calling of pure creation."
When the symphony ended after about 10 minutes, absolute silence returned. Alex sighed contentedly. But then, he suddenly patted his pocket.
Damn it! Where's my wristwatch?
His antique watch, a memento from his father, was gone. He had taken it off before sleeping, but now it wasn't in his jacket pocket. Hui and Lin helped him search. Nothing. Maybe a thief? Hui wondered. No, there's no one here but us, Alex said, though his eyes revealed confusion. Lin suddenly recalled the stories of souls trapped on this road.
Alex, Lin whispered, are you sure you haven't
Paid a price for that music? Alex angrily waved his hand dismissively, but on the second night, things grew much more terrifying. The symphony played again, louder and more complex this time. It held a powerful allure, a promise of greatness and immortality. When the music stopped, Alex touched his finger. His wedding ring was gone. Alex's face was ashen. He realized the music wasn't free. It was an initiation invitation into the orchestra of the village's dead souls. And the price to hear the music, to become part of it, was his cherished possessions, his memories tied to the outside world. Lin, horrified, looked up at the crumbling stone walls. She saw no people, but she saw faint light from the cracks in the stones, moving in rhythm. On the third night, Alex couldn't sleep. He was terrified, yet couldn't resist the symphony. When the music began, he screamed, trying to cover his ears, but the sound echoed directly in his mind. He looked at Hui and Lin with panicked eyes.
Save me! It wants everything I have!
When the music stopped, Alex touched his ear. His hearing aid was gone. More terrifyingly, he could no longer hear Hui and Lin's voices. His world had descended into absolute silence. Alex looked desperately at Lin. He pointed to the silver ring on her hand. He scribbled on the ground.
The music wants your ring!
Lin understood. The ring wasn't the possession it was searching for. The ring was resisting the symphony's call. Hui and Lin decided they had to leave immediately, but Alex clung tightly to Hui's leg, his face now blank, his eyes staring into space.
Don't go! Don't leave me behind! I want to be part of the music!
Alex screamed, but no sound came out except a dry gasp. Alex was no longer afraid. He was utterly mesmerized by the music and accepted his fate. He turned, walking slowly towards the ruined structures. Hui and Lin fled the ghost village, leaving Alex, who had become the newest member of the Eternal Orchestra. As they sped away, Hui looked in the rearview mirror. He saw Alex standing in the center of the village, raising both hands to the sky in a gesture of adoration. And then, his body began to blur, merging into the darkness and the stone walls. Now, Highway 666 didn't just claim lives, it claimed the things that make life, turning its victims into components of the curse itself. Hui and Lin knew they were driving through a labyrinth of trapped souls, and the silver ring was the only thing connecting them to reality, but also the reason they were being hunted even more fiercely. Episode 7, The Voice in the Rearview Mirror. Highway 666 led Hui and Lin up the steep passes and winding mountain roads of Colorado. After the symphony incident, they had completely lost faith in finding an escape. Lin was almost silent, only gripping Hui's hand, the silver ring as cold as an anchor dragging them down into the road's abyss. In a last-ditch effort to clear the heavy atmosphere, they switched drivers. Lin drove.
She believed that being behind the wheel would help her control at least a part of her fate, instead of just being a passenger on this journey of doom. As the car climbed the mountain peak, thick, chilling fog enveloped the road. Every curve became dangerous, and Lynn had to concentrate intensely. Suddenly, she looked in the rearview mirror. She saw an old car, 70s style, clinging tightly behind them. The car didn't have its headlights on, only the faint moonlight shining on it. She couldn't clearly see who was inside, but there was a blurry shadow of a menacing man, sitting bolt upright, staring intently at them. Lynn sped up. The car behind accelerated too. Lynn slowed down. That car slowed down as well, always maintaining a set distance, like an inescapable shadow.
"Hui, do you see it?"
Lynn whispered.
"That car. It's following us."
Hui looked in the rearview mirror. He saw the car, but not the shadow of the man Lynn described. "I just see a car. Maybe another lost traveler." Lynn shook her head. She knew Hui was either lying to reassure her, or perhaps the silver ring was making her see things others couldn't. As they drove through a dense pine forest, the image of the blood-soaked girl from episode 2 flashed in Lynn's mind. She shuddered.
"That's not a person, Hui. That's something worse."
Suddenly, a deep, cold, and emotionless voice echoed in the car cabin. The voice wasn't coming from the radio, nor from Hui, but seemed to emanate directly from the rearview mirror itself. "You can't run away, Lynn. You always wanted to leave everything behind, didn't you?" Lynn slammed on the brakes. She screamed. That voice, it was the voice of her ex-husband, whom she had left behind after a bitter divorce many years ago. Lynn had tried to run away from her old life, from the commitment and the haunting guilt. Hui panicked. "Whose voice is that, Lynn? I don't hear anything." The voice spoke again, only Lynn hearing it, sharp as a razor. "He can't hear me. This is your own voice, Lynn. The voice of what you did. I've always been watching you." Lynn looked into the rearview mirror. The menacing shadow of the man in the car behind had become clearer, and it was indeed her ex-husband's face. The face hadn't aged, hadn't changed, only bore an infinite coldness and reproach. The silver ring on Lynn's hand suddenly became red hot. The pain sensation was no longer Sarah's, but Lynn's pain. From the moment she made the decision to leave, the pain of suppressed regret and guilt. Lynn realized the horrifying truth. This shadow and voice were not ghosts on the road, but manifested memories, a spectral entity created by her own regret and guilt. Highway 666 didn't just claim lives. It took pain, turning it into a tool for hunting souls. The voice continued to torment her, recounting in detail every tiny mistake from her past, every lie she had buried. "Did you think you could start over? This road doesn't allow that. Every sin must be paid for, Lynn, and I am your price." Lynn drove recklessly through the dangerous curves. The car behind still clung fiercely. She tried to smash the rearview mirror, but every time her hand touched it, the mirror was ice cold and hard as steel. Finally, Lynn made a desperate decision. She slammed the brakes, causing Hui's car to spin and crash into a roadside tree. A terrible collision sound. Hui passed out. Lynn was still conscious, but injured. She looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The old car had stopped right behind theirs, completely unaffected by the crash. The shadow of her ex-husband smiled a chilling smile, and the voice spoke one last time. Closer, clearer,
as if he was sitting right next to her. "See, Lynn, you can't save yourself. And now, I will never leave you." When Lynn turned to look at Hui, she saw his face was pale, but on his forehead, where the wound was bleeding, a faint light was forming, the image of a silver wedding ring, Hui's future. Lynn knew the crash hadn't saved her. It had only caused her guilt to spread to Hui. He had become the victim of her torment. This car was not an escape vehicle, but an inescapable trap created by her own horrifying memories. Waking from the shock, Lynn desperately tried to remove the ring from her hand, attempting to throw it away. But when her fingers touched the ring, she no longer felt coldness or pain. It had warmed up, and it was fusing into her skin. She could no longer take it off. Now, she was not just the cursed bride of Highway 666, but also a captive victim of her own painful memories. And Hui, the man she loved, was a hostage to her atonement. Episode 8. The Fragments of the Doomed Day. After the horrific crash in Colorado, Hui woke up with a head wound and a profound skepticism about reality. He realized Lynn was completely exhausted and barely speaking, her eyes wide and staring into space. The silver ring was now a part of her, icy cold and faintly bleeding. They continued driving down a narrow, small road, believed to be a shortcut to the coast, but which was actually a forgotten stretch of Highway 666 in Wyoming. Lynn, in a rare moment of lucidity, told him about the voice in the rearview mirror and how it had linked her guilt to Hui. Hui tried to be optimistic, urging them to find an exit. He recalled rumors of a catastrophic plane crash that occurred on this road in 1978. It was said that the plane wreckage was still scattered in the forest. He decided to go look for it. After walking about a mile into the old pine forest, they found a clearing where pieces of airplane wreckage lay scattered beneath layers of moss and dry leaves. It was a scene of devastation. Twisted metal, charred seats, and a heavy, musty odor. They began searching. Hui found a broken wristwatch. Its hand stopped at 4:17. The moment he touched it, a cold electric current shot through his arm, and in his mind, he heard the chaotic screams of passengers, smelled burning fuel, and felt the sudden loss of gravity. He had relived the moment of the plane crash. "Don't touch anything!" Lynn screamed, having seen Hui's convulsion. But curiosity and the obsession with this road had overridden fear. Lynn, with the silver ring flashing, found a partially melted plastic astronaut toy. The moment she picked it up, she heard a child's cry, the plea, "Mommy," and the extreme terror of fragmentation. She shivered, feeling the death of the child who had clutched the toy. They realized that these fragments were not just physical remnants. They were the emotional recorders of death, preserving the victim's final moments. As they went deeper, they found a small, burst-open suitcase. Inside was a small diary with damp pages. Lynn picked it up. The journal entries spoke of a vacation trip and prayers for a safe flight. Lynn read aloud the final lines, hastily scrawled. "I'm scared. I see the wing. It's not right." As Lynn read that, she once again felt the owner's despair. But worse, she saw a fleeting image of a car speeding madly down the trail. What do you see?" Hui asked. Lynn trembled, pointing to an object buried beneath the tree roots. It was an old, crumpled map of the area, drawn in pencil. The map was not an aviation chart. It was a road map. Hui picked up the map. His hand shook uncontrollably. The map detailed the trail, the plane crash site, and the landmarks they had just passed.
And at the end of the road, marked with a thick, shaky pencil stroke, was an X symbol. Right next to that X symbol was a crude drawing of a car. Their car. The face of the artist had been quickly sketched. Hui looked at it, and his blood froze. The face drawn on the map, though only a sketch, was undeniably Lynn's face. And next to her, another face, slightly blurred by fear, but unmistakable. Hui's face. They had not only found the fragments of the doomed day in 1978, they had found the prediction of their own doomed day. This map was drawn by a victim who foresaw Hui and Lynn's death. Or perhaps one of the victims saw the scene of them arriving here to meet their end. Lynn looked at Hui, her eyes watering.
We weren't searching. We are the ones who have been found.
Hui immediately tore the map, throwing it into the bushes. But when he turned back, Lynn had collapsed. The silver ring on her hand was glowing brightly. And this time, she didn't feel the pain of others or her own. She felt the emptiness of death, the sensation of a soul disintegrating, as if her life force was being drawn out to fill the voids on the map that had just been torn. They ran out of the forest. When they looked back at the clearing, all the airplane fragments and belongings had vanished under a thick fog. They knew that what they saw was only a temporary reappearance, a curtain of horror lifted just to show them their own outcome. Now, Hui and Lynn were no longer survivors. They were ghosts being herded by destiny into the final trap of Highway 666. Episode 9. The House with 7 Blind Windows. Highway 666, like a living creature, now led Hui and Lynn to the low-lying, damp, and foggy lands of Louisiana. The air smelled heavily of mud, stagnant water, and ancient death. After the fragments incident, Lynn was utterly depleted, both physically and mentally. The silver ring had fully fused with her skin, and she felt a strong pull towards the south. Finally, they found a swampy path leading to an isolated old farmhouse. The house was built in the old Creole style, 3 stories high, known for a distinctive architectural feature. 7 attic windows lined up horizontally. 6 windows were wide open, black as empty eye sockets. But the 7th window, on the far right, was always sealed shut with a rough old wooden plank. This was the house with 7 blind windows, famous for the legend of 7 children who died in a mysterious fire in the 19th century. 6 of the children wanted to be set free, but the 7th, known as the Sealer, held their souls captive and turned the house into an eternal prison. The house exuded an oppressive silence, yet Lynn felt a commotion inside. She saw the flickering child ghosts behind the 6 open windows. When they stopped the car, a small old truck was already parked there. It belonged to Jonah, a professional ghost hunter who was trying to film a documentary about the house. Jonah approached them, his face strained. "I know what's happening to you. That ring, it's the key," Jonah said. He had heard about the bride legend on Highway 666. "I came here to free the souls of the 6 children. They just want out. But the 7th one, it's a malevolent entity. It needs to be sealed." Jonah believed the silver ring on Lynn's hand was an ancient artifact linked to the road's energy, and it could be used to open or close spiritual gateways. That night, the 3 of them entered the house together. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, dust, and a slight metallic sulfurous odor. The weak, pleading whispers of the 6 child spirits echoed through the rooms.
Help us. Open the window. Let us see the sun.
Lynn, heavily affected by the ring, felt the spirits trying to touch her. Jonah decided to head up to the attic. He brought his recording equipment and a chisel. Hui and Lynn followed. The attic was cramped, full of cobwebs and dust. 6 windows were open, letting in faint moonlight, and at the end of the room was the 7th window, sealed shut by the wooden plank. The plank felt abnormally cold and thick compared to the rest of the structure. As Jonah began to chisel the plank, the cries of the 6 children suddenly grew louder, more joyful. But at the same time, a deep, fierce hiss echoed from behind the plank, like a wounded animal. Jonah paid no mind, focused only on opening the window.
Wait, Jonah!
Lynn screamed. Something is trying to get out, and it's not a child. Jonah finally pried the plank open. The wood fell to the floor. Instead of a normal glass window, it was a square opening, pitch black, without any light. From inside, a blast of icy, rotting air shot out at their faces. The 6 child spirits vanished simultaneously with a joyful shriek, but immediately afterward, a large, formless black shadow shot out of the 7th window opening. It didn't flee. It lunged straight at Jonah. The shadow enveloped Jonah, and he began to shriek. The screams were not of pain, but of horrific realization, as he understood that what he had released was not a soul, but a malevolent entity that had turned the 7th child into its vessel. The entity, the sealer, didn't just hold souls. It absorbed them and used the house to lure people like Jonah. As the black shadow retreated back into the window opening, Jonah fell to the floor. He wasn't dead, but his face had become a complete blank, his eyes wide open, devoid of any sign of consciousness. And then Hui and Lynn saw the final horror. When they looked at the 7th window opening, it had sealed itself shut. The wooden plank had been pushed back into its exact position, but beneath the plank, a piece of fabric was now clamped. It was a piece of Jonah's shirt. Jonah had not been killed. He had been sealed. He had become the 8th soul of the house, eternally trapped within that pitch-black wall. He had become the next window. Hui and Lynn fled the horrifying house. They had seen that Highway 666 not only ended lives, but also turned the dead into instruments of torment and the living into sacrifices for ancient entities. As they sped away, they looked back at the house. The 7th window remained sealed, but this time, Lynn knew she could hear a faint, pleading voice from within the wooden plank.
Don't go. Let me out. Don't let them seal me.
It was Jonah's voice. They had failed to save him, and now only one final episode remained. One last chapter on this road. They knew that Highway 666 was leading them to the Phoenix, where all bends return to the beginning. Episode 10, The Finish Line and the First Bend. Highway 666 finally led Hui and Lynn to the coast of California. Along the steep cliffs, the thick, chilling fog of the Pacific Ocean covered everything. They had driven all night, utterly exhausted, and their hope for an escape had completely run dry. They found an old rusty sign that clearly stated, "End of Federal Highway 666, dead end." The road terminated at a sheer cliff face where the ocean waves roared fiercely. They had reached the end of the line. Hui and Lynn breathed a sigh of relief, but the feeling of victory quickly vanished. Right at this final point stood an old abandoned gas station. It was wooden, the canopy had collapsed, and a manual gas pump lay derelict. And right next to the station, an old woman sat on a stone chair, her face wrinkled like tree bark, her opaque black eyes staring intensely at them. "Welcome, travelers," the old woman said, her voice raspy like grinding sand and pebbles. "You have traveled the entire road." Lynn felt a terrifying energy radiating from the old woman. She was not human. The silver ring on Lynn's hand suddenly grew unbearably hot, and she realized that the old woman was an ancient entity that the ring was trying to communicate with. "Who are you?" Hui asked, his voice trembling. "I am the gatekeeper," the old woman smiled, a smile utterly devoid of humanity. "I guard the boundary. You believe this is the finish line, but it is not." The old woman slowly stood up, pointing toward the sea. The waves were surging, and the fog obscured their vision. Highway 666 is not a linear road, my children. It is an infinite loop. It bends back into itself like a Mobius strip. The old woman explained that those who travel this road are trapped in a cycle of horrifying reincarnation. They seek an exit, but in reality, they are merely being herded by fate from one tragedy to the next. Lynn looked at the cliff face. The thick fog began to lift, and she saw a terrifying sight. Through the mist, she did not see the endless ocean. She saw familiar scenes flickering into view. An old, rusty, tractor trailer parked at an old truck stop, Episode 1. A rusty steel bridge, Episode 2. And a cornfield taller than a man, Episode 3. 3. The finish line of Highway 666 is the first bend. We desperately turned back, looking at the road they had just traveled. That road was not normal asphalt. It was a muddy trail full of sinkholes and fragments, Episodes 5 and 8.
"What do we do? How do we get out?"
We cried out to the gatekeeper. The old woman laughed, her laughter sounding like the screech of twisted metal. "There is no getting out. Only the next wrong choice. The girl's ring. It holds her soul. It forces her to repeat this cycle forever until she accepts her destiny as the bride of the road." She stepped closer to Lynn, her skeletal finger pointing at the ring. "Unless she offers the ring and all its memories to me. She will be free, but she will forget everything, and the loop will seek a new soul to replace her." Lynn looked at Hui, who was desperate and trapped. She was too weary of the curses, the ghosts, and the pain. She wanted it to end. Lynn closed her eyes, resolving to offer the ring. But just as Lynn had that thought, the silver ring suddenly turned ice cold again, and she heard hundreds of voices whispering simultaneously. Sarah's mournful cries, Alex's screams, Jonah's pleas. The trapped souls did not want her to offer the ring. It was their only hope of being remembered. Lynn opened her eyes. She decided not to offer it. She couldn't betray the souls who had placed their hope in her. "We will not offer it," Lynn said, her voice weak but resolute. The gatekeeper shrugged, her wrinkled face turning indifferent. "Then the next journey begins." The old woman waved her hand. Instantly, an old rusty tractor trailer with burning yellow headlights materialized from the fog ahead, right at the cliff's bend. It was the phantom hauler from Episode 1, but this time, it wasn't just a phantom truck. It was the gateway. Hui and Lynn felt an invisible force powerfully pulling them forward. They climbed into the car and Hui drove straight toward the phantom truck.
In the final moment, as their car sped toward the phantom hauler's burning yellow light, Lynn looked into the rearview mirror. She saw the gatekeeper standing there, smiling. And right before their eyes, the road vanished. They saw no sea, no cliff. They saw the barren desert of Arizona. They saw an old rusty sign, Old Betsy, truck stop. They were back at the starting point. But it was not their starting point. The silver ring on Lynn's hand was gone. She felt a complete emptiness in her mind, with no memory of Sarah, the sinkhole, or the deadly photograph. Hui turned to Lynn.
Are you all right, Lynn? I feel like we got completely lost on Highway 666. We should stop for the night at this truck stop before continuing. It seems quiet. Lynn smiled, a radiant, completely unknowing smile. She remembered nothing of the 9 horrific episodes that had passed. She had lost all memory, but the loop continued. And then Lynn looked in the rearview mirror. She saw a blurry shadow of a menacing man sitting bolt upright in an old car, clinging tightly behind them. It was the image of her ex-husband, waiting for the next bend. And as Hui prepared to turn off the engine, he heard a deep, unnatural rumble of an engine echoing from the distance. The symphony of Highway 666 had begun anew.